Interested in getting your brand in front of the decision makers shaping the healthcare spaces of the future? Join us October 24th for a live experiential research event. We call it a hackathon, and it will bring decision makers from A&D, end user, and many places in between to explore how healthcare decisions for the built environment happen today. This will take place alongside the HCD Healthcare Design Conference in Kansas City. So if you want your brand to be in the room where it happens, reach out to me, Amanda Schneider, to secure your sponsorship spot today. What if the most powerful force in healthcare's future isn't a breakthrough drug, but instead the spaces we live, work, and heal in? Welcome to Design Nerds Anonymous, the podcast that sparks curiosity at the intersection of business and design. I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, founder and president at ThinkLab, and speaker, now featured on TED.com. Today, we're exploring the idea that the most powerful shift in healthcare isn't about medicine at all, but about mindset. We're living in a time when AI can detect disease before we even feel symptoms, when digital health tools sit in our pockets, and when entire generations trust TikTok more than traditional healthcare systems. And yet, our environments, our homes, clinics, schools, workplaces, often remain rooted in an outdated model of care, reactive, rigid, and siloed. So, what if we flip that script? What if our built environments, the spaces we already spend our lives in, could become active participants in our well-being? What if homes became responsive health hubs? Clinics became welcoming community anchors? What if wellness was no longer something we chased, but something seamlessly embedded into our everyday life? In this episode, we explore exactly that. You'll learn why millennials and Gen Z are opting out of traditional healthcare systems, and how that's pushing us to redesign everything from clinics to communication. We'll talk about the growing digital divide across generations, the decentralization of care, and how AI might soon turn the way we move, speak, and even sleep into early health signals. And we'll unpack why, in a time of constant change, designing for flexibility may be the most urgent challenge of all. Our guest today is Costanza Sessioni, Medical Affairs Lead for Italy at Viatris, a global healthcare company that reaches nearly 1 billion lives annually. She brings both scientific rigor and a deeply human perspective to what healthcare and care itself could look like in the future. In part 2 of the episode, we go a step deeper. I'll be catching up with my friend Kaylin Reed from Kimball International. She's rolling out a new research report that examines the future of healthcare. I think my favorite takeaway is this new term, Uber for nursing. So to begin, I asked Costanza to introduce herself and to capture the future that she sees in just one word.
My name is Costanza Sessioni. If I had to pick a word to describe the future, but please consider that is my opinion and not a reflection implication of Beatrice, it would be reframed. Because the way we think about health, how we care for people, and how healthcare is organized need to be reframed, rethought, especially as new generation bring fresh perspectives and expectations. I work in Beatrice, a global healthcare company with the mission to empower people worldwide to live healthier at every stage of life. We provide access, currently supplying high-quality medicine to approximately 1 billion around the world annually, and touching all life's moments, from birth to end of life, acute condition, and chronic diseases. In my role in medical affairs, I work every day to address unmet needs promptly and to improve their health and well-being. I work with all stakeholders in healthcare system like institutions, associations, scientific societies, and individuals.
We're just getting started. A quick pause for this short break, and we'll be right back.
We are at our best when we have an authentic, deep relationship with all of the people that we work with. When we are brought in early, when we are seen as a partner, that's when we can deliver our best and provide the best outcomes for everyone involved. Mannington Commercial is relationship focused. We want to connect, and it's not just about flooring solutions. It's about how we all work together synergistically on all of the projects that we work on. It's not transactional. It's how can we really support the needs and the requirements with our full attention and our full suite of solutions, but really with the intent of making everything the best that it can possibly be. Hi, I'm Cindy Kaufman. I'm Vice President of Marketing with Mannington Commercial, and we are a very proud sponsor of the DNA podcast. We would love to invite everyone to come and connect with us, whether that means visiting our website, at one of our showrooms, connecting with one of our local reps in whatever market they're in. We will be more than happy to meet you where you are and support you through whatever your project needs are, and longer term than that.
Now, back to the conversation. Can you talk a little bit more about your research? Where in your work do you see data pointing to opportunities?
We have done lots of research along with my colleague Joris Wood and Tineke van Leberg. We came across quite a few unexpected stats during our work of research, but the one that personally struck me the most are, first of all, it was surprising to see that millennials, despite being the most health-conscious generation, use traditional healthcare system infrequently, with 51% visiting a primary health physician less than one per year. They have also a low utilization for inpatient and outpatient services. Instead, they're much more likely to embrace telemedicine and other online components of healthcare. Plus, they place importance on the opinion of their peers and patient testimonial while choosing a healthcare provider. Another interesting point is about Gen Z. As you expect, social media is an important source of healthcare information for them. But what is really surprising is that they're more likely to trust healthcare information from the internet than from healthcare professionals, with 32% relying on social media for health information versus 20% for non-Gen Z generation. And they only account for 3.3% of total healthcare spending. But that's partially because they're younger and healthier the most. They also aren't getting the kind of healthcare offering they want, they need, and will seek out if offered. Last but definitely not less important is that only 34% of people aged 65 to 74 have basic digital skills, compared to 69% of those aged 25 to 34. This highlights a significant digital divide that impacts the adoption of digital health technologies among older generations. As we look towards the future of medicine, we must keep this in mind. Generational gap in digital health literacy should be addressed through targeted education. A holistic approach is needed, one that tailors information to each generation needs, preferred sources, and literacy level.
So interesting. And I think it's really interesting to look at that gap from these younger generations and what they expect from a digital standpoint, and even how that trust is built with them compared to some of these older generations that maybe don't have that literacy, which is interesting as we look at having to bridge the gap of the times that we're in right now between maybe the digitally preferred and the digitally less literate. But I want to look at the built environment. We know that the world is shifting fast. AI is coming, Gen Alpha. We're looking at climate change, evolving expectations around work, health, education, communication, and all of this is evolving in real time. But the physical environments that we build can't pivot overnight. It's very long-term, very expensive to make changes to the physical environment, and yet it still has to keep pace with these changing demands. So, Costanza, given everything that you're seeing in your work, how might this data that you're talking about show up in the built environment when we look at how we design, especially clinics and healthcare facilities? And what advice would you give to those trying to build these spaces today that can still serve tomorrow?
We are moving towards an hybrid future where care is decentralized, more integrated into daily life, both physically and digitally. The future of care won't just be about curing, but caring, with architecture and technology working hand in hand to create spaces that can cure before you even see a doctor. In this vision, home, for example, may evolve into personal health hubs because they are the place where we feel safest, where we can truly prioritize our well-being, listen to our bodies, take preventive actions. Home have to be equipped with tech for remote monitoring, for example, mental wellness tool, preventive care, or even virtual consultation. As health become more proactive and personalized, architecture will play a key role in supporting this transformation. I'm thinking about natural light to regulate sleep and mood, a smart ventilation system, and adaptable spaces that can host virtual consultation. Integrated tech like biometric sensor will help monitor our well-being in real time, turning homes into living responsive ecosystem. In this vision, home is no longer where we live. It becomes the first line of care, a personal space that nurtures health long before we need a clinic. At the same time, I think the clinic need to be transformed. They need to be smaller, modular, and why not mobile, ready to reach communities, designed to go to people rather than waiting for patients to come to them. Architecturally, these spaces should prioritize human comfort and dignity. The cold clinical aesthetic have to give way to warm, welcoming environment inspired by hospitality and biophilic design, reducing anxiety and promoting healings. Clinics need also to incorporate advanced technology to meet the expectations of younger generations. For example, virtual consultation rooms for telehealth, touchless check-in systems, and acoustic privacy. We need to change the paradigm beyond treating illness. These clinics will support prevention education, ongoing wellness, becoming community anchor for digital health literacy, chronic disease management, and mental health support. I don't think in this vision, a traditional hospital will disappear, but their role will change. They will become more specialized, focus on complex care, acute intervention, surgeries, emergency medicine. In a way, they will be the last stop, not the first. And even hospital, though, will be reframed. They'll need to feel less overwhelming, more human. That means designing for emotional as well as for physical needs. In this ecosystem of care, school and workplaces will also have a pivotal role. They should evolve into wellness environment with human-centered design that brings the outdoor in, encourage movement and physical comfort, include adaptable calming area for relaxation. This environment has to prioritize empathy over efficiency, recognizing that well-being enhances performance. School need to nurture emotional intelligence alongside academic growth. While workplaces adapt to individual rhythm and needs, health will be seamlessly embedded in daily routine, not something pursued separately. A new culture of care will shape how we learn, work, and live together. My advice is to build flexibility and adaptability in every space. Prioritize interoperability between physical and digital touchpoints. Incorporate technology infrastructure that can be easily updated. We have to include young people in the design process, but we need to consider the needs of diverse generation. We have to go from the silent generation to Gen Alpha, ensuring accessibility and comfort for all.
Which sounds a lot easier than it is, especially when their needs are sometimes so different. And it's very difficult to meet the needs of everyone in one space. And I think this is what I really like about the way we at ThinkLab have studied generations is it's not about giving up one thing by one generation so that another generation can gain. It's really about looking at those commonalities across all. So, Costanza, as we look at applying this information, I love your vision for this more integrated ecosystem of spaces that rather than fixing the sick, promote health. What would you say is one idea or insight that has recently changed the way that you personally think about the future?
Something that really shifted my perspective lately is the idea that uncertainty isn't something we react to. It's actually a design principle in itself. Instead of building for single, fixed future, we must design for multiplicity, for fluid identities, hybrid physical and digital realities, and evolving values. I think that this mindset requires us to build and embrace flexibility and inclusivity across all fields. Just like in design, the future of healthcare must be adaptable and deeply rooted in both human and technological understanding.
Which is a lovely idea. We still have some work to do to figure out exactly how to get there. That is where I'm excited to empower our listeners to really imagine this future and help us put the building blocks in place to get there. So let's fast forward to 2040. What is one radical possibility that you can imagine for the future? Maybe something that feels wild now, but could actually happen.
In my opinion, by 2040, AI powered personalized healthcare will have become the norm. With AI tool not only assisting in diagnosis and treatment just like now, but also predicting health issues before they arise, providing tailored health plans and offering real-time mental health support through virtual assistants. This shift could lead to a significant reduction in chronic diseases and more proactive approach to health and wellness. What it might seem radical today is the idea that this predictive phase will rely not only on medical data, but on the vast amount of personal information we generate daily. Our diet, sleep patterns, movement, voice, online activity, even the way we type or talk. All these can be turned into health signals, processed in real time by AI to create a dynamic and continuous updated health profile. By combining wearable technology, environmental sensor, and behavioral analytics, AI could flag early signs of illness well before the symptoms appear, potentially preventing condition rather than just treating them. It's a future where healthcare becomes seamlessly integrated into our daily lives, invisible yet deeply personal. This development will significantly alter the design, transforming the roles of healthcare providers and even the pharmaceutical company themselves.
Thanks, Costanza. I know I'll be thinking about that impactful stat about how Gen Z is more reliant on social media over their own healthcare practitioners. It's certainly impacted my view about the opportunity for healthcare to evolve. Now, let's switch gears. For this next interview, I'd like for all of us to imagine that we're in the hospital of the future. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And maybe more importantly, what's possible? Let's hear from our favorite futurist, Kaylin Reed. We're just getting started. A quick pause for this short break, and we'll be right back.
We challenged the status quo. We went looking for new and inspiring ideas beyond our Pinterest feeds, connecting the dots between how the future was unfolding and how we should be designing for it. I'm Kaylin Reed, Applied Insight Strategist, Certified Futurist, and host of Alternative Design Podcast. We started Alternative Design as a beacon of hope for our industry at a time when the world was no longer business as usual. At Kimball International, the future isn't something that we wait for. We search for it, spotting the signals that reveal where the human experience is headed, both inside and far beyond the design industry. Alternative design is where those signals turn into ideas, where we connect what's happening in the world to what it means for the way that we design spaces and the furniture that shapes them. Because when we design with intention, we're not just making furniture, we're making a better future. If you're a fan of Design Nerds Anonymous, you will love Alternative Design. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to subscribe to help us design what's next.
All right, Let's get back into it. Kaylin, welcome back to Design Nerds Anonymous. And I'm super excited to have you on this particular episode because you and your team have just released a fascinating new report titled Key Trends Redefining Healthcare. I want to start a little bit broad. Given everything you've learned as you've developed that report, what is one word that you would use to describe the future you see coming for healthcare?
If I had to choose one word, I would say connected. What really came through in this report is how care is no longer confined to hospital walls. It's really reaching into our homes, into our workplaces, and of course, even our grocery stores, right? Patients in particular are more connected to their own data. If you have an Oura Ring or, a Fitbit, patients have more and more accessibility to understanding what their heart rate means for them personally, right? Which is really exciting and a new frontier for patients for sure. Caregivers are more connected to flexible staffing and more real-time information, and communities are becoming more connected via public health through the opportunity to have more patient data that's coming out of their silos. And it's actually becoming more connected so that public health data is becoming more reflective of the local communities around them, because once you can plug in that patient health data, it can actually start to translate into really meaningful insights about the region and about the communities and what their health needs are. And it's not just about technology either. It's actually about connecting the dots between physical, mental, social, and increasingly environmental health. That level of connection is what's going to redefine what healing looks like in the future.
I love the positive spin on that. You and I have talked a lot about AI and some of the connectivity and the pros and cons. So let's dive into your report a bit. What would you say are three of the most surprising or revealing themes from your work in this space that relate to this episode's topic?
So first is this idea of Uber for nursing, which is a title that we had for one of our trends that we're seeing around staffing models, and really the shift towards something that's more gig-like and it's more flexible. Nurses are able to choose shifts that fit their lifestyle. They can even move in between health systems. And so on one hand, there's retention and work-life balance that we can talk about that are obviously very positive in that regard. But it also challenges how we design those spaces, because if you think about it, you have caregivers who are walking in who may not know the layout or the workflow or the culture of a hospital system. And so that really means that there's greater responsibility being put on the design of the built environment of the space in order to communicate what's going on and when and where, right? And so there's a big conversation that has to happen around, if we're seeing these flexible staffing models, how do we make sure that the built environment is intuitive for them and that it can be easy to navigate? Because as we know, time is crucial in these environments. Time being confused about what hallway to go down is really problematic when there's an emergency. That definitely becomes something that we as designers need to consider.
I love that connected theme came through, even not only for the patients, but also for the staff. Let's dive in a little bit deeper to some of the shifts that we're seeing happen as it relates to the built environment. Given everything that you're seeing in your work, how do you think some of this connectivity is going to translate to physical changes to the built environment? And what advice would you give to those trying to construct these spaces today that can still serve for tomorrow?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Those buildings can't turn on a dime, but much of our research has shown that the smartest design decisions that you can make today are the ones that are going to anticipate change in the future. So one big shift that we're seeing is healthcare spaces that are evolving into learning environments. Hospitals aren't just treatment centers anymore. They're becoming places for education, of course, for research, and even for lifestyle coaching. You may walk into a hospital that has a teaching kitchen or a broadcast room right alongside an exam room. And so what that requires is spaces that are going to be flexible and, of course, be multifunctional and multi-purpose, so that they can move seamlessly between things like clinical care and then community engagement and staff training. Another piece that often gets overlooked is what happens after mergers and acquisitions. So we're seeing, of course, the continuation of health systems that are consolidating. Campuses are absorbing those new functions, those new brands even, and again, even whole new patient populations and staff populations. And so suddenly we go back to this wayfinding conversation that becomes really critical, not just signage, but environments that feel cohesive, particularly as the back end gets more complex, right? So design has to make these very large integrated systems still feel navigatable and very human at its core. So my advice for those building today is design for radical flexibility, but also for clarity. So when I say radical flexibility, I want to just put the disclaimer that I'm talking about more than just casters on a chair. I mean, truly thinking about how a space can shift functions within the same day, perhaps even the same hour. Obviously, furniture is a big factor in that, but we also need to be thinking about things like modular design and responsive architecture as well. We need to make sure that patients and family and staff can confidently find their way through these environments that are, again, increasingly layered. They're really complex. So, right now, we're watching things like AI and beacon technology that are able to provide precise location information to guide users throughout the hospital with really high accuracy. And some of these health systems are even leveraging AI to analyze patient data and visitor movements as to where they're going throughout the building so they can understand where those bottlenecks are and optimize signage placement. We'll likely continue to see real-time data start to influence wayfinding systems during peak times or even during emergencies as well.
Super interesting. And I think, again, just tying it back to your initial word connected, I feel like when we think about these spaces, they've historically been separate, like this is the staff area and this is the patient area. And even, here's a nurse's station, but you don't cross this line. It almost sounds like some of your suggestions are also connecting the staff areas with the patient areas, maybe in new ways, or at least that allow the same spaces to be a bit more flexible. Is that accurate?
Definitely. And honestly, that brings me to another trend that we had identified was this concept of the self-empowered patient. To your point of how we might see new space typologies come to exist with new roles and relationships happening in healthcare with the Aura rings and the Fitbits and the Apple Watches that's providing patients with all this data. These patients are walking in with a lot more of a collaborative desire to have the role with to have a relationship with their doctor that's more collaborative in nature. So they want to walk in with their information and say, here's my sleep data from the past 6 months. Tell me what this means for my diet and my nutrition, right? And so, but that concept is so different than a traditional doctor knows best. You walk in, you get your assignment, your prescription, and you walk out. It's really reshaping it to be collaborative. So the environment, when we think about what does that mean for the exam room or the waiting room, how do we make sure that that digital data can be something that can be shared between doctor and patient? How is the exam room going to be designed to be a more collaborative environment where you can look at the data together? You can participate in shared decision making. And so to your point earlier about how these roles are shifting and how it might change the built environment, we see an opportunity for these exam rooms to really shift into something more consultative in nature. And so, that may change posture, that might change how casual or how residential the room feels so that it feels like you're walking more into like a therapist's office than, you know what I mean? So I think it just could change the perception of how we design these spaces in the next 5 to 10 years.
Certainly exciting changes, especially for a system that has treated the sick rather than nurturing the healthy to be healthier. I know you're a futurist. This is a hot topic and a passion topic for you. If any of our listeners did not hear Kaylin on our live panel at NeoCon, she dropped a future scenario that was a mic drop moment of that episode. I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. But Kaylin, I want to invite you maybe into another future scenario, leveraging all of the skills that you've learned in your education. So fast forward to 2040. As we really try to paint a picture of a brighter future that everyone wants to move towards, what is one radical possibility you might imagine for the future? Maybe something that feels wild now, but could actually happen.
I think that by 2040, I imagine walking into a hospital is going to feel a lot less like entering a maze like it is today, and a lot more like stepping into this intelligent ecosystem that already knows you. The building knows you. It could recognize you the moment you arrive, not just who you are, but why you're there and what matters to you in that moment. So instead of checking in the desk and hoping that you can find your way, your environment would greet you with perhaps a personalized roadmap that gives you where your treatment is, where your family can wait, where the nearest coffee spot is, if that's important to you, or even a quiet pod to hop on a Zoom call while you wait for a loved one to go through a procedure. And really, this isn't even that radical. I mean, we're already seeing signs and signals that are sort of pointing to this responsiveness of the built environment. This is where, again, AI and interoperability and experiential design are all headed towards this reality of stepping into the space. And again, the building knows who you are. So it sounds wild today, but by 2040, these spaces will be less of a static container of treatments and meetings and more of a responsive partner. So the environment's going to flex in real time. It'll adapt not just to your clinical needs, but to your emotional state, to your lifestyle preferences. And that's the radical possibility that spaces don't just hold care, but they actually start to participate in the care, whether that be through sensory design or through trauma-informed design, or again, through personalized wayfinding and making the hospital, again, this intuitive, easily navigatable experience. So this is something that can really start to shape health outcomes. And we know as designers that the built environment, often we like to say it's almost the first caregiver. When you step into a space, how does it make you feel? That can immediately impact your heart rate, that can immediately impact your subconscious. But imagine if the built environment was truly that active partner that was actually starting to shape health outcomes in real time.
I know that this is a very big passion topic for you, not just treating the sick, but making the well healthier. Will you share a little bit with our listeners about your story and why this matters to you?
Yeah, really the origination of alternative design was a big sea change that happened in my life when I got really sick in my mid-20s. And I was really facing a really crazy diagnosis at the time that felt like it was pretty scary. I didn't really think that there was a way out. And it challenged my perception of not just the world, but on healing and what that meant. And so it really required me to start to challenge the status quo. And so I started asking better questions. I like to say that experience made me a researcher. So, I mean, I started with a design degree. I joke, I like shapes and colors, right? Like, so I mean, you start there, but then when something like that happens to you and you're forced to really dig in to the questions and you're forced to uncover the whys, it really took me down a more alternative path. And so I looked at a lot more alternative medicine and I looked at more holistic forms of healing in order to get my health back. And so much of the Alternative Design podcast is rooted in this idea that not all answers are found in the center. Some answers are truly found in the fringes and in the outer parts of what we perceive as normal or traditional ways of thinking. And so I like to bring that with me to a lot of my work and a lot of my research and a lot of what we do on alternative design, because I think that some of the best insights can be shaped from unlikely sources.
And I guess given this personal touch and that personal story to you, how do you hope people use this research that you're sharing with the world?
I hope that people leverage the research and really just the trends to have a better understanding of what's going on more holistically in the world around us. So yes, there are trends that encompass the built environment that are very specific for the design community, but there are also trends that are happening just on a more broad healthcare industry scale that should be considered, because it's going to help reps understand what their customers are currently facing, what are the challenges and what are the pain points. And of course, we know if you can be more familiar with those pain points, you can better position your products, you can better position solutions that are going to be meaningful and actually help. When it comes to designers, my hope is that this gives a way forward and a different way to think about the built environment that can be more future ready, that can be more anticipatory of what's coming down the road. Everybody wants to have the magic 8-ball to shake and get the answer of what it's going to be in the next 5 years. But my hope is that this can expand our thinking to get out of the now and really start to think, what are the opportunities in the built environment that we can shape, that we don't have to be afraid of? You mentioned earlier, there's pros and cons to AI. I mean, we had a great conversation about pros and cons to all of this technology advancements. And so how do we get ahead of some of those things and really make sure that the built environment and placemaking as a practice stays true to the ethos of making a better human experience, instead of it being something that just feels like it's AI driven and it's perhaps inauthentic and feels sterile. We don't want to lose the humanity, in the built environment.
Well said. Well said. And I certainly hope that some of your reps and distributors can carry this forward to their clients, and that inspires some of our design audience to dig a little bit deeper too. Kaylin, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us again on Design Nerds Anonymous, and super excited to share with you and our listeners as the rest of this season unfolds. It's going to be fascinating.
Thanks so much for having me, Amanda.
If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. My hope is that something you heard today will stick with you and maybe even shift the way you see what's ahead. I do have one small ask before you go. If this conversation resonated with you in any way, please follow the show. Better yet, leave a review. It may seem like a small action, but it's how these ideas reach more and more people who care about shaping the future. So thanks for listening. I'm really glad you're here. Design Nerds Anonymous is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Special thanks to the podcast production team, Hannah Vitti, Rachel Senator, and Rob Schulte.